Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Discovery Show. Kendra and I are thrilled to kick off this event and have a conversation about the current market conditions, the opportunity for founders in this market, and how to think about how you can progress your business today. As mentioned, my name is Chris Pinkerton. I lead our investment partnerships at Clearco. For those of you who don't know, Clearco is the world's largest e-commerce investor. We've deployed $3.5 billion across 7,000 founders in about 8 countries. And in that deployment of capital, we've done it in a very unique way where a founder can connect their payment processors to us and a marketing account, and we just use data to understand how much capital a founder can qualify for. It's non-dilutive capital, there's no equity that's taken in your business, and it's a way that we can also remove the bias in investing. In our business, we have funded 25 times the amount of female founders that traditional VCs have funded. And conversely to that, our investments have actually provided capital to, I think our entire portfolio is about 35% minority founders that we've been able to fund. And what that really means is there's a lot of great founders out there that aren't getting capital to grow their business. And so we're pretty pleased with that being a byproduct of the way that we deploy capital in the market today. And that's a conversation that Kendra and I are going to talk about a bit today as well. Being a lender in this space, the thing that I wanted to kind of speak to is the headlines that you're reading in the newspaper today. The Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to combat inflation. You're seeing that inflation rates are hovering around 10%, and they're expected to maybe even go a little bit higher. Some of you that have businesses that have certain products are probably see that impact today with how much vendor costs are going up and how costly it is to run a business today. But having said that, that's kind of a depressing headline to read every day. The true job of a founder is to look at the constraints that are coming at your business and try and navigate those constraints. You either work within them, try to mitigate them, or try to remove that constraint altogether. And today, in today's environment, we have seen D2C brands that are able to thrive and continue to grow because they can efficiently acquire a customer in the market. And when we look at prior recessionary periods, some of the greatest brands that we all know and love today came out of a recession. Uber came out of it, Airbnb came out of a recession. One of the things that we see being invested in so many different e-commerce founders is that there's an opportunity for hundreds and hundreds of brands to prove themselves during this economic condition and come out of it even stronger than they are today. And that's really the conversation that Kendra and I are going to have. I'll introduce Kendra in 1 second. And one of the things that is creating the opportunity for D2C founders is the ecosystem that's been built over the last decade. In the last 10 years of economic growth and the emergence of so many tools and providers and the broader ecosystem in e-com, there's an opportunity for founders to thrive and learn during this period and build resilient businesses over the long term. In the last decade, there are more incubators, studios, accelerators, investors that are in the e-com space, and it's creating an opportunity for a founder to be able to navigate the conditions that they face every single day. One of the great things about a studio and an accelerator and incubator is they develop tools, best practices, mentorship, investment, and ways that you can learn from previous mistakes so that you can build a thriving business without having to go through that pain yourself. And so our conversation today is really going to be about why a studio exists, what it could do for a founder, and how you as a founder and a brand can use the ecosystem that's provided for you nowadays to thrive and grow your business. And so I'm super thrilled to have Kendra with me today. We're partners. Kendra has built a couple of companies. She's also the CEO and founder of BrainTrust Studio. And I would love to get her opinion on the market and how founders can think today and what the democratization of capital in the market is doing for founders of all varieties and all stages of their company. And so, Kendra, maybe first question to you today. Can you maybe explain to the audience your background, what is BrainTrust Studio and why you decided to launch a studio?
Absolutely. So I'm so happy to be here today. As some of you may know, I'm a huge fan of FounderMade, the Discovery Show, and the opportunities and access that they're giving to founders. As Chris mentioned, we are partners. We actually, when we were launching the studio, which I'll talk about, Clearco came on board and immediately raised their hand and said, we want to support founders and we want to support Black founders. And so our missions were very aligned. If I take a step back, Chris gave us some amazing context and content in terms of the market, what we're seeing. For me personally, when I think about my background, I am a 3-time founder. I've raised money, sold a company, bought it back. I helped build a digital practice group within the largest PR agency in the world, and then did it again at Ralph Lauren, helping to expand and build the brand digitally, but also globally. And so when I had the opportunity to become a founder, I resisted a little bit. I was like, I'm not sure about this. But I met my first business partner, and in 2010, we launched Digital Brand Architects, which was, at the time, one of the first agencies to manage bloggers as talent. And so in being a founder, but also helping other entrepreneurs build and grow their businesses, I had an interesting bird's eye view to the market, to what founders need to build their own companies. So fast forward, worked with talent for a long time. And then 6 years ago, started BrainTrust. And I started with Halle Berry and Blushington as my clients. And I was very much focused on using the most modern forms of communication, social media, influencer marketing, to really help brands grow and scale. And so after doing that and going into the pandemic as a founder, but also being in a community of founders. And we know as Black founders, there are more businesses that are created by us, but we also have the highest rates of failure. And so in going through a pandemic, thinking about the resources, talking to my other founder friends, I said, there has to be a way, and you said it, that with community, we can come together and we can support each other. And so last October, we launched our BrainTrust Founder Studio to support Black founders of beauty and wellness companies. Thank you, Lisa Stone, my co-founder. And we provide, Chris talked about ecosystem, and I said, we provide an ecosystem for winning. And that's through community, which we know community is needed. None of us were meant to be here alone. I named my company BrainTrust because I believe in smart people coming together to solve problems. Community is why we're all here. Mentorship, we don't know everything. We can be mentees, we can be mentors, but the role of a mentor and a champion is always what you need in terms of helping to build your business and to learn from others. And then we talk about education, right? We're learning things every single day. Like literally at the beginning of the year, I was like, what do I need to know? Crypto, venture, we all have to be educated, and capital. And that was where the relationship with us and Clearco really started, because I believe that it's about differentiated sources of capital depending upon where you are in your journey. And at the studio, because we focus on start founders, founders in the growth period and accelerate period, when you think about Clearco and funding, when you may not be ready for venture, there's all these educational resources that companies like Clearco and that the studio use to help founders progress forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the things over the last decade that's strengthened the ecosystem is not only accelerators and studios, but there is, it may not feel like it today, but there is more consumer investment today in early stage founders than there's ever been. The challenge, I think, today is how do you get access to that capital? And so going through studios and going through accelerators can help educate you on when is the right time to raise capital, when do you look at equity in your business versus things like revenue-based financing or invoice factoring or invoice funding, when you can look at modern financial institutions like neobanks that are designed for startups and they're more startup friendly. The other side of this, I think, is thinking through at what stage in your business would a studio or a mentor or a program like that make sense for you. Could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned various stages of early stage, kind of product market fit, scale up. At what stage is a studio most valuable, and is it at every stage? Can you just kind of comment on that?
Absolutely. And I think to Chris's point, you know, I'm of the mindset of leave no founder behind. Whenever you build something and start something, you're always going to be at a different phase, right? We could each start a business at the same time in the same category and still have different needs. And so the reason we set the studio up to have 3 tiers, start, grow, and accelerate, is because we believe that there is no founder who doesn't need access to some type of a resource at every stage as they're building their company. And so we like to look at, where are you? How can we support you? But also knowing that different people are going to have different needs. And so Clearco may be right for some, and to your point, venture, given the time that we're in, may be right for others. And so it was important for us to be able to meet you where you are and to leverage AI and data and shopper data to really create the ecosystem. I hate to use it again. We talked about the word ecosystem, but it's true. Without that, it's hard to tap into resources as a single founder. And we know that each founder has gone through something that we can learn that's going to reduce the amount of time that we have to figure out how to do it so that we can run our businesses. At the end of the day, the more time we spend trying to figure out how to raise capital, how to find manufacturing, the less time we can spend being the visionaries and the leaders of our businesses.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're seeing across a lot of founders during kind of the last 6 months is they're trying to focus on diversifying their business so that they're not dependent on one ad platform for all of their customer acquisition. They're not dependent on a single supply chain that could disrupt their business. And that sort of thinking is creating a more sustainable business for you, a more resilient business for you, and it allows you to weather the storms. And when I talked about brands that get built during this time tend to come out stronger, it's that sort of thinking. Because 6 months, actually more than that, probably 9 to 12 months ago, we were in an environment where it was growth at all costs. You just kept pushing and pushing and pushing to try and grow the business. But this is a time where you want to put a different lens on your business and reframe how to create really strong unit economics in your business, how to have a savvy go-to-market strategy in your business that has a diversified approach, that you're not increasing your customer acquisition cost and your core costs of your business due to inflation are increasing as well, because that chart doesn't look good as you get farther and farther down the axis. And so in thinking through the sentiment of founders today, you work with a lot of founders, obviously. What is their view right now of the market? Are they still super optimistic? Are they trying to figure out how to navigate it? Like, what is the sentiment that you're seeing?
So it's interesting. I think that there is a lens of, now is a time for us to seize the opportunity as founders. There are more resources out there, but I also think that the landscape is quite competitive. We talk about the rising costs of manufacturing, of supplies, of products. And so I think that it's what I'm hearing and what I know as a founder is that it really is, how do I distill down the basic things that I need to do right now? 1, to make sure my business survives. 2, to make sure that I can start to thrive. And then what does profitability look like? And how do I make sure that I'm staying the course? And a lot of, even for those of you that were there yesterday, a lot of what we've been talking about is, how do we look at marketing? How do we know that paid social, the social media platforms, the algorithms, we know that it's about us owning our own data, owning our own email addresses. How do we double down there? And how do we stay true to what our product is and what we represent? And we're seeing a lot of founders trying to pivot and navigate and going off course of what their main mission is, what their main product is. Double down there, get that right. Figure out the marketing that you can do now and sustain yourself so that when it is time and you can expand, then you're coming out with new products, you're changing your distribution, you're doing all these things. But I think we're hearing so many founders trying to navigate the sustainability to get us through to the other side.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And maybe if you could harken back to when you were a founder earlier, can you talk a bit about the overwhelming feeling of trying to take in all the things that you could think about as a founder and trying to focus on the most important things in your business right away? Can you maybe just talk about how overwhelming it can be to kind of absorb everything at once?
Yeah, and I think, we're founders because we like the thrill of creating things. I mean, you don't become a founder if you're a faint at heart. Like, let's just be honest. Like, we all have something in our brains that are causing us to do that. And the big things that we're hearing, staffing and resources, who do I hire first? How do I expand? What does that look like? And we've been saying to our founders, like, what are the most urgent needs that you need right now? Let's truly go through where your time is spent. What's the value of your time against someone else doing it? We work with a lot of founders who right now are solopreneurs, but they are on the track to grow. But then we also work with founders who are at 20 million owning their own manufacturing and have a team of 50. So their challenge is a little bit different because it's how do I keep up with inventory? How do I get more inventory so that I can meet my POs? And that's why for the studio, we have to be able to track towards that. But at the end of the day, it's centering on where do you need to be? How do you need to get there? And what's that path?
Yeah, that's so great. And could you also comment on some of the broader initiatives you're doing with BrainTrust? Like I know we were talking backstage about your desire to see better representation on a show floor like this today. Can you just talk about your thoughts around that?
Absolutely. So as you walk through the show floor, make sure that you stop by booth 107. And in all seriousness, to Chris's point, I mentioned earlier that I'm a huge fan of FounderMade. I've been coming here since before the pandemic. I've always found value in taking something out of the show that I can bring back to my business. One of the things that I have seen is the need for more diversity. Diversity across the board, from gender to LGBTQIA, race. And so I went to the team at FounderMade and I said, we have a studio. I'm very focused on how do we progress founders forward in general, but our studio is really focused on Black founders because we know the stats in terms of what we lack: resource, networking, capital. And so I said, it is my goal to support our friend Aurora, who created the 15% pledge. And as I walked through and noticed the lack of diversity on the floor, I said, can we make a pledge together so that 15% of the booths would be dedicated to Black founders? And the team at FounderMade resoundingly said yes. And so we're kicking off an initiative next year to make sure that we can bring more diversity into the show. And so at our booth, 107, the BrainTrust booth, we are showcasing all 81 of our founders through content. We have 81 founders, 91% of them are women. And so it was our goal to start the conversation and to get people thinking about how do we bring founders along, especially underrepresented founders. And from an overall programming perspective, it's been important for us to show up at things like FounderMade, at things like Cosmoprof, at things like Essence Festival, so that South by Southwest, so that we can continue to create spaces where founders can come together and ask questions. Because to your point, it is tough. And so every program that we create, if there's a founder who said, I learned something, I gained value, I now have access to financing, I have access to a 3PL, then we're doing our part to make sure that founders have a better pathway to success.
Isn't that a powerful initiative that they're running? That's pretty cool, and we're happy to support that as well when we can. When I mentioned earlier that our organization, because we lend capital just based on the unit economics of your business, and we actually don't meet the founder until we provide them capital, we stumbled upon the data that told us that we were funding 25 times as many female founders as traditional venture, and 35% of our portfolio was minority founders. That wasn't the intent of our business. Our intent of our business was to democratize access to capital, to allow early stage founders to be able to get capital and not have to sign a personal guarantee and give up a lot of their personal business to take that risk. And so what we discovered then was a pleasant surprise, but also a bit disheartening, that there's so many really good founders out there that don't get their business to the stage where they can actually try to find product market fit and scale and grow. And that's why our initiatives of working with studios and incubators and founders is to connect that community together. And FounderMade is basically at the heart of this ecosystem, right? The shows like this today is what bring the community together. There's investors, there's studios, accelerators, there's founders, there's platforms, there's tools. It's events like this that can really solidify how you can think about your business and how you can short circuit some of that learning that's required that you may feel overwhelmed with. Some of the best conversations that can happen is to have a founder sit with a founder for lunch and just talk about what they're struggling with, because that sort of insight can help you reframe your thinking and continue to persevere, because to build a resilient business takes a lot of perseverance. It's longer than you expect, and it's harder than you expect. But the reward at the end of the day is remarkable in building something. And look at the energy of a founder. Like you saw a problem. You were a founder yourself. You saw a problem, and you thought, how can I solve this problem and build a studio? And I think that's such a remarkable thing, and you're a remarkable person for being able to achieve that. I would love to get your thoughts as a founder on how you would approach an event like this. So you're in the middle of the community, you have a day. how would you think about walking around a show like this?
Well, and it's interesting because we've thought about how do we integrate into the show effectively as we're trying to build on the challenge, as we're trying to get more founders here. And even looking out, I see so many of our founders in the room. Thank you so much for being here. And a lot of it was us communicating the opportunity. Like, we were sending out codes to our founders so that they could even participate in the show. We have one of our partners doing a mixer. You know, I have to thank Mason Hub, who is our 3PL partner, who showed up, to Tariq, who came in and literally said, we're going to help put a booth together. You guys, many of you may or may not know, when we were launching the studio, we did a pitch competition with Clearco. And they essentially gave out $75,000 in products and services and in cash, which we love the cash, to support founders. And when you think about, you know, we're almost a year in, those founders are now thriving, they're growing, they've been able to learn a lot, they've been able to go into Clearco. And so when we think about, it may not just be this moment in time, you may walk the show today, you may even join our studio, you may sign up for Clearco, and you may not see an immediate benefit, but it's a long-term play when you're a founder. Unless you're just in it for this one moment, which I don't think we are, it's the long-term play of maximizing every single opportunity, showing up when there's opportunities to come to events like this, coming to panels to meet not just us, we don't know everything, but to network with every single person in here, because they're gonna teach you something that we don't know and that you don't know. And then looking at different resources and saying, let me tap in now or let me tap in later. And I think that's why I love the piece of education, because there's so many things I didn't know when I did my first company, and having to get out of that because I didn't know, or I didn't have the right lawyer, and I didn't have the right this. And so I think about, to your point, it's really tapping in and understanding what's going on and not being afraid to ask for help whenever you need it.
That's great. And I want to go a little off script a little bit, because you mentioned in the beginning when you were explaining the studio, how many female founders are in the program?
91% of our founders.
91%. So I'm a father of two girls. I'm a feminist at heart. Can you talk about how the thinking of how to be involved with a family environment and running a business, and the thought process that's required to manage those things? Because running a family is hard enough. Is that part of the support that you guys provide in having a lot of female founders together to try and figure out how they're balancing work and life and all of that?
So it's interesting. So we have been talking to our founders, and a few of the key things that are coming up, of course, balance, as well as mental health and mental awareness. And we're really looking at how do we support that? Because the family element, you know, there's very few people who are like, I'm just doing this one thing and that's all I'm doing, and I'm not thinking about anything else, and I don't have to do anything else. Most of us are being pulled in multiple directions, and it may not be children, it may just be life or a pet or a family member, and or even just your own home. Like, running a home is hard. And so we have been tapping into the business only runs when the founder is also healthy enough to run it, if the founder has positioned themselves as the true operator of the business. And so for us, we know that it has to go deeper than understanding venture, understanding manufacturer, that the whole self and our well-being is so important to how we show up, how we navigate, and how we motivate our teams. That's the hard part in business, is sometimes just the team management. Oh,
100% it is. And maybe to that point, how many of your founders are single founders? Is there a lot of co-founders in your cohort?
The majority, I feel like, are solopreneurs. We do have co-founders. In the studio, we focus on the founder themselves. So even if you have 3 co-founders, 2 co-founders, each co-founder we try and service as their own entity as the founder, and then support their company as well. Because I think, you know, having had co-founders, and I even shouted out Lisa Stone, my co-founder, who's here for the studio and our fund, it's such a different dynamic, because even though you're a founder in a business and you're building that together, you're still a person. So as a person, you still have your own needs, your own setup, your own community that you're dealing with. And so we think it's important for each founder to have their experience as they navigate their joint company.
Yeah, that's such tremendous insight. And I think that's the type of thinking that you get in a studio, and when you attach yourself to an environment like that. Because a lot of times you can struggle yourself in trying to figure this out, and until you communicate with others that are trying to solve the same problem, that's when you can rationalize how you can approach it and how you can find that balance. I mean, balance is a funny word. Sometimes you're just trying to do it all, right? But you mentally need to feel balanced, even though you're still trying to juggle everything. Well, it was great chatting with you.
Wait, I have one question.
Sure.
I have a question for Chris, because I'm looking at all of the founders that are out there, and we just got our countdown. But for founders that are thinking about capital and are thinking about the difference between something like a Clearco or even venture, can you just explain the difference? Because I know you talked about it a little bit, and like, how did they get to you?
No, that's a great point, and I think finance and capital can seem overwhelming and confusing because it's almost like its own little cliquey group. And when you think about raising money for a business, especially a very early stage startup business, the most expensive capital that you will ever give away is when you give equity up in your business very early in its growth stage. And so today, I think the most exciting thing for us, and there are probably 10 revenue-based financing companies that are similar to us. Everyone has a different model. There are lines of credit companies, there's neobanks, there's other solutions that you can go to raise early stage capital and not have to give up equity in your business too early. Now, I will say there are advantages to raising equity in your business when you get to a certain size, because in some cases, if you have a really innovative solution, but not a very competitive moat around your business, that means that other competitors can come in and start to eat away at your market share and your success. It can drive up acquisition cost. And so in cases like that, sometimes you need to raise more money than you can physically, manage with the unit economics of your business. And so that's when equity is a really great option, because you can create more impact in your business, grow faster, invest in the things that you know that work. One of the things that I think most founders need to realize very early is continually reassess what's working and what's not working. Double down on what's working and eliminate what's not working. And if you can have really strong unit economics, you understand how diversified your business is and how to scale it, equity and venture capital and those sorts of sources can be very powerful in growing your brand and your business and becoming a $100 million, $200, $300 million business, right? And usually to get to that stage, you need an accelerant that venture capital works really well for. And so I'm going to be at the show all day. David Stark, raise your hand. He is my colleague from Clearco as well. Happy to just dialogue with you guys what you're thinking about. And it can be very confusing, but happy to navigate that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. We're down to a couple of minutes, so thank you, Kendra. You're such a great friend and a good partner. Thank you to everyone that took the time to listen to us today, and enjoy the Discovery Show.